How mindfulness transforms anger into compassion.
Thank you for that question, because accepting things as they are is probably the hardest thing in the world to do. And of course, I'm not suggesting that we should always accept things as they are, right? There are some things that we may very well need to be changed. You know, things in society, for instance, that are creating some type of injustice for a certain group of people. We should work to try to change those things. However, I think for most people, in many situations, especially when we're emotionally triggered, we don't have any choice in the matter. We just have to react. If something triggers us in a certain way, we react. And oftentimes the reaction is not skillful for us or for the people around us. So one of the benefits of consistent training in mindfulness is that it gives us the freedom to have the choice. If there's something unpleasant that's happening right now, but I don't actually need to change it, I have the choice to just allow it to be there and it doesn't cause any suffering. Whereas for somebody that hasn't trained to develop that, if they're truly triggered, and this happens to all of us. I mean, even people, including me, who have been practicing for many, many, many years, there are still things that catch us off guard, and we get triggered, and we react in a way that we don't really want to. Now, so there's some levels here as to how mindfulness helps with this. So the first one is just starting to catch our reaction sooner. So for some of us, when we get triggered, we're not even aware that we're triggered until it's too late. We've already said something to somebody that we didn't want to, and then we regret it later, right? So then with a little bit more of training, we might catch that reaction a little bit sooner, and we notice there's anger here. And instead of saying something that we regret, we have some tools to down-regulate that anger. So with some intentionality, right? And we might, if there's time today, we might share some skillful ways of doing that. So we can intentionally kind of regulate an emotion to get back to a state where we're a little bit more neutral, and we can be a little more skillful with our words and with our actions. And then kind of the next level is that we start to really accept the internal reaction. And when an internal reaction is truly accepted, we don't really have to do anything intentionally to down-regulate the emotion. It kind of happens all on its own. Then the step beyond that, which most of us will never reach most likely in our lifetimes, is where the reaction never arises in the first place. So there is so much wisdom that anything that happens, it never bothers us. There's never a negative emotion that arises. For most of us in this room, myself included, that will probably never happen. However, we can move closer and closer to that. I can say that in my own experience, there are many things that used to trigger me and cause a reaction that no longer do. They just arise and there's just no emotional response whatsoever, and I can bear it with a smile with no problem, including physical pain. There are many things like that. But if we hold ourselves to that ideal, we're going to have some problems, because the reality is even the wisest people on this planet still get triggered from time to time, and sometimes quite often. So the step where I think right before that, this is where we can really notice a tremendous amount of freedom, and it's actually quite realistic. And that is where we start to see the internal reaction as something that's just happening. It's not me, it's not mine. It's a totally natural thing for this body and mind to do. And when it's seen in that way, then it dissipates pretty quickly on its own. It still arises, like you might get really angry, and then you notice it, but then 3 minutes later, it's like it never happened. This is one way that toddlers kind of have us beat in terms of emotional wisdom. You know, if you watch a toddler, when they lose it, right? And it happens quick. But then the moment it's over, it's like it never happened, right? so they don't have the ability to regulate an emotion or to even, I guess we could just stop with that. They don't have the ability to regulate an emotion. However, because they don't have all these fixed things that they've created in their heads like we do, the emotion passes pretty quickly once it's done. So once it kind of resolves itself a little bit, it's literally like it never happened. Whereas for most of us, it doesn't work that way, does it? If we really get angry, if we're honest, we're thinking about that for 2 days. A little bit here, a little bit there, sometimes a week or more. Sometimes if you've really, really been angry, you might think about it 3 months later. Oh, I remember that day when that happened. That doesn't happen for toddlers. And the good news is I think that's kind of our natural state. We can kind of get back to that wisdom. But how we do that is developing a little bit of compassion for ourselves. Now this can start as an intellectual process, so this is how I recommend you could kind of start. But if you consider however this thing reacts, why does it do that? Why does it react in the way that it reacts? And if you really analyze the situation, it's obvious, right? This thing's going to react according to its programming. What programs it? Well, it's a combination of genetics and all of the life experiences that it has had up to this moment in time. Period. Right? This thing, it's going to react in that way, according to its programming. There's nothing that I can do to stop that. At least in the short term. In the long term, with lots and lots of practice, the brain can actually change as a result of mindfulness in ways that the reactions dissipate and don't occur anymore. But again, for most of us, that's not going to happen. What is realistic is that we can start to see this more and more objectively. That, hey, okay, this person said this, the ego was offended, and now there's anger. And it's totally natural. This is why I think beginners in the practice tend to do really well because they don't beat themselves up so much when that happens. People in the intermediate to more advanced range, they suffer a lot when they get angry because they're telling themselves like, oh, I've been practicing mindfulness for 7 years. I shouldn't be getting angry. I should be at peace all the time. That's just it's not how it works. So the reality is that this thing is going to respond according to its programming. And the more that we observe the body with awareness and observe the mind with this awareness, this mindfulness is by definition an awareness that does not judge, it does not criticize, it does not want to change. That's all activity of the mind. So in any moment that we're sustaining this mindful self-awareness, all there is a recognition that there is anger. There are thoughts triggering anger. There is tension. It's just noticed. And that right there allows it to dissipate because we're not fueling it anymore with, well, I shouldn't be doing that, and now I can't believe I'm angry, and what's wrong with me? Why am I still getting? That's all just stuff we add to it, right? And continues to fuel it. So just this pure recognition of what's happening, there is peace right there. Now, what can make it a little bit easier to have the courage to do that, because this takes courage, right? It takes courage to say, all right, there's anger here. I'm not going to be dishonest and say, no, there's no anger. I am a mindfulness practitioner with many years of experience. I don't get angry. Or to fuel it by saying, oh, I should have said this, and I can't believe she said that. Somewhere in the middle is a way out. Because suppressing it's not the way out. If you pretend you're not angry, you can pretend a little bit, but eventually you're going to blow up. You're going to have what do they call it, going postal or something like that? It's going to be bad. You can't repress anger for long. In the middle is a way out. And the middle is there's anger here. It's okay for that to happen. There are angry thoughts happening in reaction to what just happened. It's okay for that to happen. So I find it sometimes helpful to, if there's really some emotion that I'm struggling with, to just gently remind myself that that's just where this thing is at right now. This body and mind, that's where it's at. My job is just to recognize what's there, not try to change it, not trying to fix it, not trying to judge myself for being like that. Just recognize that that's what's there. Now, you had also mentioned you find sometimes other people are doing things that you don't want, and it's hard to accept them. I have found this to be very, very helpful for that. Not so much in the moment. We don't want to be necessarily doing this cognitive exercise in the moment. In the moment, it's much better, in my opinion, to just recognize whatever reaction is coming up for you. Somebody does something, you recognize their reaction. However, later, once you've kind of come back to a more peaceful emotional state, it can be very skillful to reflect on that person in the same way that we just reflected on ourselves. So if we're totally honest, let's say there's a person over here that just did something that offended all of us. If we're totally honest, what we have to admit is that if we had this person's genes and we lived their lives exactly the way that they lived up till this moment in time, we would have done the same thing. Right? Assuming that they don't have a very high level of mindfulness. If they have a high degree of mindful self-awareness, they might have some freedom from following their internal reaction and saying whatever they said. But assuming that they don't have that gift, which most of us don't, probably 95% of the time we're not being mindfully self-aware, we're identified with our thinking. And in any moment someone's identified with their thinking, for all practical purposes, they are a computer program, doing what they've been programmed to do by their genetics and their life experiences up till now. Now that sounds kind of cold as an analysis, right? This is, a human being is just a program. I'm not really saying that, I'm saying their behavior is a program. However, either way, although the analysis might sound a little cold, I have found that to be extremely helpful in cultivating compassion. Because if you can really see that this person is just doing the best that they can with what they have, based on their genetics and their life experiences up to now, it's really hard to be angry at a person like that. And I see this, I'm lucky right now, I have a 3-year-old and now a almost 3-week-old, or she is 3 weeks now actually, as of yesterday. And it's obvious with a child, right? We do this with child. Anyone who's been around a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old or had a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, you know they're just doing, what are they doing? Exactly what they've seen. I can't tell you how many things my son does that is exactly the way that I do them or my wife does them. Until he went to school, we could pinpoint where every behavior came from. He either got it from me or my wife, or his genetics, or some combination thereof. But you knew that's where those things were coming from. It's the same for us. We're just a little bit more complex. It's a little bit harder to see all the causes and conditions that led to us reacting in the ways that we do as adults. But that programming is there. And if we can see it, then we can have a little bit more compassion for ourselves and for others. Hello, my friend, and thank you for taking a minute to check out this video here at the Mindfulness Edge. I hope that you enjoyed it and found it helpful. Please feel free to leave any questions that you have about the practice down in the comment section below if you think I could be of help. I do my best to answer as many of those questions as I can, and I enjoy helping wherever I can. If you found the video helpful, please feel free to subscribe to this channel to make sure that you never miss any of the videos that we post. And you could also feel free to go ahead and hit that little like button. That will help other people to see this video, and hopefully it will be of help to them as well. And if you like, I have a little gift for you. If you head on over to themindfulnessedge.com, I'd be happy to give you free sample chapters of my book called The Mindfulness Edge. So until next time, I hope you are well.